My name is Patrick Ngwila. I'm a social protection specialist working with the Workers' Compensation Fund of Tanzania. In this session, we'll cover social protection financial governance indicators. We'll also look at the tools for financial governance. These are basically the social budgeting and micro-simulation models. Now, every country and each scheme of social protection usually should develop a set of indicators and data that are required for monitoring the financial governance of social protection. Such indicators and data should then be made available to all stakeholders in a manner that is easy to read and understand. The second part of the presentation will look at the tools of financial governance in social protection. In essence, taking decisions about social protection in any country, one must be well informed about the choices they want to make. Now, social protection systems involves the decisions about the current and future. For example, the impacts of demographic shifts and pensions and social security reforms for a country would need some adequate information about their implication. Many countries try to reform their social security systems. However, the most important tool to assist these countries in decision-making today will be discussed in this lecture. Now, at this point, we are going to introduce two important tools that are important for decision-making, and that is social budgeting and micro-simulation models. Now, social budgeting, in essence, establishes income and expenditure accounts for all existing social protection schemes in the country, and then projects using actuarial methods those accounts into the future. Social budgeting exercise is very demanding in terms of data requirements, and in most cases take relatively long time to implement. In summary, social budgeting helps to answer the following key questions. 1. What is the present overall level of expenditure to social protection programs of this particular country? Number 2, where is the money spent and how much? Thirdly, where are unmet social protection needs? And fourthly, how is the overall national social protection expenditure? In answering this question, definitely there will be a set of information required. One of it is population data for that particular country. And this should be aggregated in terms of the gender, the male and female, of each age, as well as the expected life expectancy of these people. Secondly, you would require to have labor market data. For example, you might need to have an employment rate. You might also need to have percentage of formal employment to total population of a country. Thirdly, it's important to understand the current GDP of that particular country. It's also important to understand the inflation rates as well as average wages of staff within this country. Lastly, in doing the social budgeting, it is important to have information related to benefit parameters that this country wants to offer. For example, what is the age of potential beneficiaries? What is the poverty rate among target beneficiaries? What is the number of beneficiaries as a proportion of the total population? What is the benefit amount as a proportion of the per capita GDP? And lastly, what is expected to be the administrative cost of the program? This set of information is essential if one wants to properly undertake a social budgeting exercise. Now, having looked at the social budget aspects, the second important tool for social governance, social protection financial governance, is micro-simulation. In the context of social protection, a micro-simulation model is a useful tool in informing policymakers about the implication of various choices they make in social protection. For example, social protection expenditure decisions and their impact and outcome to the people. Secondly, the impact of social protection expenditure and poverty reduction. And thirdly, the policy implication of universal programs as compared to means-tested programs. All these kind of decision-making requires a micro-simulation model to be able to guide policymakers. Having looked at the micro-simulation model and its importance in social protection financing, let's now look at the resource mobilization for social protection programs. Now, the cost of social protection program is merely a social protection policy choice. Many countries do allocate resources to social protection based on their appetite to spend in social protection. Expenditure in social protection forms part of the physical space of the country. Now, physical space is an amount of resources allocated for social protection out of the resource envelope of a particular country. And this resource envelope is usually not a fixed envelope. It can be adjusted as a result of the policy choices that the country would make. For example, a country may decide to expand its resource envelope by creating an earmarked tax to finance social protection programs. It's also possible to spend efficiently elsewhere so that you get resources for social protection. We also have a number of international donors who are very much willing to put some grants into financing social protection. Again, social protection is an investment. Countries may also wish to borrow some resources in order to put money into the poor. And this eventually will stimulate the money circulation into the economy. And lastly, in order to mobilize resources for social protection, there are 3 A's that are important to be considered. And these are authority, acceptance, and ability. Any country that is willing to make a bigger policy space for social protection must engage the people with authority to provide resources. Any country that wishes to create a largest policy space for social protection must start from the top authority. So policymakers must be willing to spend some more resources into social protection. In addition, the policymakers need also to communicate their good wishes of spending and justifying the reasons for spending more money into social protection in order to create public acceptance. And lastly, for these decisions to pay, there must be people who are able and capable to implement these programs successfully to the expectations of the people in authority. As a takeaway message, there are 2 important tools of financial governance in social protection. And this is social budget, which looks at the income and expenditure accounts of the country. And secondly, a micro-simulation model, which essentially tries to assess the impact of every expenditure decision the country makes in social protection. And lastly, expenditure in social protection requires so many efforts to mobilize resources. And resource envelope for social protection is not a fixed envelope. Countries can adjust this envelope in order to put more money for social protection, since social protection is an investment. Thank you very much.